We loved it. It was tiny, it was cute, it was the best premium compact flagship, but almost no one actually bought it. Why did the iPhone 12 mini fail? Why did no one buy it? Let's find out. Apple has always loved small phones. They were one of the last manufacturers to actually add a big phone to their lineup. And when they did in 2014, they made sure to still keep the 4.7-inch regular iPhone 6 in addition to the 6 Plus. And every year since then, when they've launched a Plus or a Max, they've also launched the smaller phone, and it sold well. So well, in fact, that Apple experimented with the iPhone SE a few years back, and that sold really well. It was a small phone, and they decided to follow it up in April of 2020 with the iPhone SE 2. And within a few months of that phone coming out, it was the third most popular iPhone. So Apple took note. People want small phones. And that note led to Apple making a pretty bad bet. In the fall of 2020, they came out with the iPhone 12, 12 Pro, and 12 Pro Max, but also a miniature version, the iPhone 12 mini. It should sell because people love small phones, right? Well, it seemed like a really good bet because, as I mentioned in this phone's review, Apple is trying to move away from just being a strictly hardware-based company to being a hardware and software-based company. Software and services are reoccurring revenue, which means that Apple can make money on a customer beyond just a one-time purchase, but also they're much more scalable and logistically easier than supply chain, shipments. So on paper, 12 mini seems like a really smart move. Give the people what they want, and when you give them what they want and they buy it, then you kind of funnel them into the service software-based business model. So that's the plan, and then the phone gets into reviewers' hands, and we actually were pretty positive about it. I think a lot of us really loved it. It was the best compact phone on the market. It's really difficult to overstate how good this phone is and how much of an engineering feat it was. Small phones are kind of relegated in consumers' minds to being the more budget side, kind of like you buy a small phone to save money and you buy a big phone to get all the premium features. And Apple switched the formula. The 12 mini is a small phone that almost has the same exact experience as their actual flagship, the iPhone 12. It made very few compromises to get to this size. In my review, I only had a few major gripes with this phone. The charging speed was on the slower side, the battery life was not that great, and the camera performance was decent. But those gripes, at the $700 retail price, were enough to be one of the contributing factors in why this phone didn't sell. And the other thing is that the iPhone 12 was priced only $100 more than the Mini, and it didn't make any of those sacrifices. So January 2021 rolls around, and Apple switches the production of 2 million iPhone 12 mini units to iPhone 12 Pro. The iPhone 12 mini is just not selling well. And I think one of the reasons was inaccurate or poor market research. They didn't understand the consumer that would want this phone. The selling point of this phone was its size. People were gonna buy this phone if they wanted a small iPhone. But the problem is they already had that opportunity 6 months prior with the iPhone SE 2, and they already bought it. All right, so if it's not about size, maybe it's about price, right? Maybe they're gonna buy this phone because it's cheaper than their iPhone 12 and 12 Pro. But then they probably would buy the iPhone SE 2 and save even more money. The iPhone SE 2 is not only the smallest iPhone now, but it's also the cheapest iPhone. So the value prop of this phone of being small and lower priced kind of gets a little outshined when you have the iPhone SE 2. And the iPhone SE 2, I think, fundamentally didn't just sell because it was a small phone. I think price was a main driving factor. Yes, of course, people wanted a small phone, but they also wanted a phone that brought them into the iOS ecosystem for only $400. The flaws that the phone had were kind of overlooked because it was only $400. At $700, every flaw that you make or every compromise you have is inspected with much more detail from consumers. The iPhone 12 mini found itself right in the middle of iPhone pricing. Let's call it the pricing valley of death, right? Because it's kind of a paradox of choice here, because it's not in the price range where consumers are getting the same bang for your buck as budget handsets, but they're also not getting the same social recognition or technical performance that you get with the regular 12 or 12 Pro. So all of these numbers and critiques and stuff probably makes it seem like the iPhone 12 mini was a terrible phone, or that I hated this phone, or that people hated this phone. And I can't stress this enough, that is not the case. This phone was beloved. It's an incredible engineering feat, and it got so many things right, and there was this very small but vocal group of people that felt like their prayers were answered with the iPhone 12 mini. But the loudest group isn't always the biggest group, and just not enough people showed up for this phone to justify the production and to make it a success. And I think that that actually brings us to an even more interesting question, which is, what would it take for Apple to make another high-end compact phone? The whole thing kind of reminds me of Lobster. Yeah, Lobster. In early colonial America, lobster was seen as like the food for the poor. It was like the main nutritional source. There was so much of it. If you were wealthier, you were able to afford other meats and sea life, so lobster was kind of left to the poorer people. But then as time went on, cattle kind of became less of a luxury item and a little bit more commoditized. And at the same time, the supply of lobster significantly decreased. Fishermen were catching a lot less lobster, so the market price of lobster went up significantly, and suddenly wealthy people were interested in it. And I kind of feel like small phones are what lobster used to be, right? Like kind of a commodity. A lot of manufacturers were making small phones. There was nothing really that mind-blowing about it, whereas bigger phones, when they came out, they would get all the headlines because they were different. But now more and more bigger phones are being manufactured, and because they've been out for many years, they're now on the resale markets for lower prices. And similarly, small phones are much more niche now. So although the iPhone 12 mini is not the success that I think Apple expected it to be, I do not think that the story and the book is closed on small smartphones. I actually think it's just beginning. And with that, you can check out another video right here. Thanks so much for watching. Bye.